The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing the rural stretch of Highway 17 in northern Michigan. Officer Daniel Harper gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, the wipers struggling to keep up with the storm. It was nearing midnight, and the world outside was a swirl of white, the kind of night where even the bravest souls stayed indoors. Daniel, a 10-year veteran of the Houghton County Sheriff's Department, was used to these brutal Upper Peninsula winters, but tonight felt different. The cold seemed to seep through the cruiser's windows, and an uneasy quiet hung over the empty road. He was halfway through his shift, patrolling the desolate stretch between Calumet and Lake Linden, when something caught his eye. A shadow moved in the blur of snow ahead, low and deliberate. He slowed the cruiser, squinting through the windshield. At first, he thought it was a deer common enough out here, but the shape was wrong. Too steady, too purposeful. As he crept closer, the headlights illuminated a German shepherd, its black antennae coat dusted with snow, standing squarely in the middle of the road. Its ears were pricked, and its eyes locked onto the cruiser with an intensity that made Daniel's pulse quicken. He eased the car to a stop, the tires crunching on the fresh snow. The dog didn't move. It stood its ground, unwavering, as if it had been waiting for him. Daniel frowned, glancing at the dashboard clock, 11:47 p.m. No collar, no tags, and no houses for miles. Strays weren't uncommon in these parts, but a German shepherd this well-groomed, out here in a blizzard? That was odd. He flicked on the cruiser's spotlight, bathing the dog in a harsh white glow. It didn't flinch. Instead, it took a single step forward, then turned its head slightly, looking back down the road as if urging him to follow. Daniel's first instinct was to radio it in. Maybe animal control could handle it. But something about the dog's demeanor stopped him. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't scared. It was insistent. "All right, buddy," he muttered, pulling his hat down and zipping his parka. "Let's see what's got you so worked up." The moment he stepped out of the cruiser, the cold hit him like a fist, stealing his breath. The wind howled, stinging his face as he approached the dog. It barked once, sharp and commanding, then trotted a few steps down the road before stopping to look back at him. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't one for superstition, but this felt like something out of a story his grandmother used to tell, tales of animals sensing things humans couldn't. He shook off the thought and followed, his boots sinking into the snow. The dog led him off the highway, down a narrow side road that was little more than a snow-covered path. Daniel's flashlight beam danced across the drifts, catching the dog's tracks as they veered into the woods. His radio crackled faintly, but he ignored it, his focus on the shepherd's steady pace. After about a quarter-mile, the dog stopped abruptly near a cluster of pines, its nose low to the ground. It let out a low whine, pawing at something buried in the snow. Daniel's heart sank as he approached. He'd seen enough in his career to know this wasn't going to be good. He knelt beside the dog, brushing away the snow with gloved hands. Beneath the powder, he found a small, bundled shape, a child's coat, blue and puffy, wrapped tightly around a figure too small to be out here alone. His breath caught as he uncovered a face, a girl, no older than 7, her lips pale and her eyes closed. Her dark hair was matted with snow, and her skin was cold to the touch. "Jesus," Daniel whispered, his training kicking in. He checked for a pulse, his fingers trembling as he pressed them against her neck. It was faint, but there, a weak, fluttering beat. She was alive. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest to share his warmth, and sprinted back toward the cruiser, the dog bounding alongside him. His radio crackled to life as he shouted for an ambulance, giving his location and a quick rundown. Hypothermia, child, urgent. Back at the cruiser, he laid the girl across the back seat, cranking the heat to full blast. The dog leapt in after her, curling up beside her as if to guard her. Daniel didn't have time to argue with the animal. He grabbed blankets from the trunk, wrapping them tightly around the girl, and checked her pulse again. Still there, still faint. "Hang on, kid," he muttered, his voice thick. "Help's coming." As he waited for the ambulance, Daniel's mind raced. Who was she? How had she ended up out here? And how the hell had that dog known? He glanced at the shepherd, its eyes fixed on the girl, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The dog's presence was no accident. It had stopped him, led him straight to her. But there was no time to dwell on it. The wail of sirens cut through the storm, and red lights flashed in the distance. The paramedics took over, their movement swift and practiced as they stabilized the girl and loaded her into the ambulance. Daniel followed in his cruiser, the dog still in the back seat, refusing to leave. At the hospital in Houghton, the girl was rushed into the ER, and Daniel found himself pacing the waiting room, the shepherd lying at his feet. He called in the situation to dispatch, requesting a check for missing children reports. Within minutes, they had a match. Lily Carter, age 7, reported missing from a foster home in Calumet earlier that evening. Her foster parents claimed she'd run away after an argument, but the details were vague, and something about their story didn't sit right with Daniel. He looked down at the dog, who hadn't moved since they arrived. "You're something else, aren't you?" he said softly. The shepherd's ears twitched, but its gaze stayed on the ER doors. Hours passed before the doctor emerged, her face tired but relieved. "She's stable," she said. "Hypothermia was severe, but you got to her just in time." Another hour out there, and she trailed off, shaking her head. "She's awake now, asking for her dog." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Her dog?" The doctor nodded. "She keeps saying Max saved her. I assume that's the one you brought in." Daniel glanced at the shepherd, who was now on its feet, tail wagging faintly. "Max, huh?" he said, crouching to meet the dog's eyes. "You're full of surprises." He followed the doctor to Lily's room, Max padding silently behind. The girl was propped up in bed, and 4 in her arm and a blanket tucked around her. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, lit up when she saw the dog. "Max," she cried, her voice hoarse but joyful. The shepherd leapt onto the bed, nuzzling her face as she wrapped her arms around him. Daniel stood back, watching the reunion. "Lily," he said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" She hesitated, her small hands buried in Max's fur. Her story came out in fragments, her voice trembling. She'd been living with her foster parents for 6 months, ever since her mother died in a car accident. "They weren't kind," she said. "They yelled, locked her in her room sometimes, and didn't let Max inside. That night, after a particularly bad fight, she'd run out into the snow, desperate to get away. Max had followed, refusing to leave her side. She'd gotten lost in the woods, too cold and tired to keep going, and had curled up under a tree, certain she'd never wake up. Max had stayed with her, keeping her warm until he'd heard the cruiser and run to get help." Daniel's jaw tightened as he listened. He'd seen cases like this before, kids slipping through the cracks, foster homes that were more about the paycheck than care. He made a mental note to dig deeper into Lily's foster parents. Something told him their story wouldn't hold up. "You're a brave girl, Lily," he said, his voice soft. "And Max here, he's a hero." She smiled faintly, her eyes heavy. "He's my best friend." Over the next few days, Daniel pieced together more of the story. Lily's foster parents were investigated, and evidence of neglect and emotional abuse came to light. They were stripped of their license, and Lily was placed with a new family, one known for their warmth and stability. Max, it turned out, had been her mother's dog, a loyal companion who'd stayed with Lily through every hardship. The hospital staff, moved by the story, started a small fund to cover Lily's medical bills and ensure Max had everything he needed: food, a warm bed, even a new collar with a tag that read, "Hero." Daniel couldn't shake the image of Max standing in the snow, staring down his cruiser. He'd always been a practical man, grounded in facts and logic, but this was different. Max hadn't just saved Lily, he'd reminded Daniel why he'd become a cop in the first place. Not for the routine traffic stops or the paperwork, but for moments like this, when a single act of courage could change everything. The story spread through Houghton County and beyond, picked up by local news and shared across social media. People sent letters, donations, even toys for Lily and treats for Max. Strangers stopped Daniel in the grocery store to shake his hand, calling him a hero. He'd just smile and say, "It wasn't me. It was the dog." Weeks later, on a crisp February morning, Daniel drove out to visit Lily at her new home. The house was a cozy, 2-story place on the edge of town, with a big yard where Max was chasing a ball, Lily's laughter ringing out as she ran after him. Her new foster mom, a kind woman named Sarah, welcomed Daniel with coffee and a plate of homemade cookies. "She's doing great," Sarah said, watching Lily and Max through the window. "She's starting to trust again. And Max, well, he's her shadow." Daniel nodded, sipping his coffee. "He's something special." Sarah smiled. "You know, Lily told me she thinks Max was sent by her mom to watch over her." Daniel didn't say anything, but the thought lingered. He wasn't sure he believed in guardian angels, but looking at Max, he couldn't entirely dismiss it either. As he drove back to the station, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered fields. He thought about Lily's smile, Max's unwavering loyalty, and the way a single moment on a snowy road had rippled outward, touching so many lives. It wasn't just about a dog stopping a police car, it was about what it meant to show up, to care, to act when it mattered most. Back at the station, his radio crackled with the usual calls: a fender bender in Hancock, a lost hiker near Copper Harbor. Daniel picked up the mic, ready to dive back into the work. But as he did, he glanced at a photo pinned to his dashboard, a snapshot someone had taken of him, Lily, and Max outside the hospital, all three of them smiling in the early morning light. He grinned to himself. "All right, Max," he said under his breath. "You've set the bar high." And with that, he pulled out of the parking lot, ready for whatever the day would bring, knowing that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, human or otherwise, could change the world.